today we're ending with a musician I've respected and whose music I've enjoyed for quite a while, and I haven't gotten a chance to hear as frequently of late. And when I found out that Greg Tardy was going to be playing, and I got caught up with some of his more recent CDs, my initial enthusiasm was reinforced. So welcome, Greg Tardy, please. Thank you. And Helen Sung was here earlier in the week. And I was saying, I go back and do research. People who I think I know as musicians, and you read their biographies, oh, gee, I didn't realize. And in a way, you and Helen share a background of having been directing yourselves toward classical music and then coming to jazz later than some.
Yes.
And so I wanted to start by asking you about the musical commitment you had made before jazz caught your attention and what kind of music you were playing.
Okay. Well, I come from a family of musicians, and my parents were both opera singers. And excuse me, I'm just I just got over a cold. I'm still coughing a bit. But yeah, my parents were both opera singers, and so I grew up with a lot of opera, a lot of Puccini, and a lot of stuff like that. And it was just commonplace, along with all the pop music and funk and stuff that everyone else were listening to. And so I'm the youngest of three kids, and my sister played the flute, my brother played the trumpet, and so it was just natural for me to pick up an instrument. And my mom bought me a clarinet, so that's what I was playing. And over the years, I eventually decided that I wanted to be a symphony clarinetist, and so I spent a lot of time preparing for that. I was studying with a really great clarinetist named Russell Dagan, who's with he was principal with the Milwaukee Symphony Orchestra, and then also Jack Snavely, who was the professor at the University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee, and that's what I was going to do. And then the thing that happened is that I dabbled with the saxophone because I always went to smaller schools, and I never really took it serious. It was just something I did for fun. But to make a long story short, people started calling me for gigs when I was in college, and I was really, really sad. I mean, really, really bad. And but I was playing these funk gigs, and at a certain point, I just thought, well, I'm horrible at this thing, but if I actually got good at it, then I could make a little bit more money. So I started practicing it more, and then at some point, my brother turned me on to John Coltrane and Sonny Stitt because he was playing jazz trumpet by that time, and that pretty much did it. So
now, I also found it interesting that after all that time on clarinet, you basically put it down for a while, but now you're playing it again. Talk a little bit about all of that.
Yeah, that was unintentional. What happened is that there came a certain point where I just figured that I needed a year to try to get my saxophone up to my clarinet, or where my clarinet was at the time. And then I learned a little bit more about music and realized I needed more than a year. And so 1 year turned into two, and then two turned into four. Then next thing you know, it's 10 years, and my clarinet was just sitting around. But I'd say at a certain point, I started dabbling around with the clarinet again. And then Tom Harrell, whose band I was in at the time, he had me come over and bring it one day, and so I played it, and I was really out of shape. And then the next thing you know, well, we were doing a CD, The Art of Rhythm, and he said I was going to be playing clarinet on it. So I'm like, okay, I guess I need to start practicing again. So I put in some really intensive practice for about half a year before that CD was done. And then after that, I stopped playing again. And then as people would ask me to play it, then I'd start playing it again. So that's kind of how it came about.
Wonder if you have any thought about how all the exposure to opera might have influenced your saxophone playing, because I don't know if it came up in the interview with Sonny Rollins we did here, or in another conversation I had with Sonny, but he once told me Coleman Hawkins loved opera.
Wow.
And was always listening to opera, and actually talked to Sonny Rollins about taking roles and, doing musical saxophone versions of operas, playing parts. But can you hear or see an influence in your music from all that exposure?
I guess looking back, probably yeah. It wasn't deliberate, but I think it just happened. I think that's just the way I've learned to deal with melody.
Okay. You've mentioned on more than one occasion that you have 3 hometowns.
Yeah.
And I find it fascinating because one is my hometown, St. Louis. One is a place I've visited that I know has a rich musical culture, New Orleans.
Mm-hmm.
And one is a place that I've heard about and, know some musicians from there. So I know that it's also a great hotbed of music, Milwaukee. So
Yeah.
take us through the hometowns and where you were at each point in the line.
Okay. That's kind of I don't know how to do that in a short bit of time. I'll just make it quick. Yeah. I was a kid in New Orleans, and about 11, when I was about maybe 11 years old, my dad's job would move us around a lot. He worked for the American Can Company, and for a while he was getting promotions, and they'd keep on moving him around. But then after a while, then the company started going under, and so they kept moving him around to keep him working. And so essentially, we moved from New Orleans to Indianapolis, and we just stayed there for a real short time. Then we moved to Milwaukee, and then that's where I went to middle school and high school. That's where I was when I first started seriously playing, when I first started playing the saxophone. So then my parents moved on to St. Louis, and at a certain point, I decided I'd move in with them to try to make a transition to either New York or somewhere else. And so I moved to St. Louis to be with them. And while I was with them, I played on the St. Louis jazz scene for a while. And then I decided to go back to New Orleans because I saw all these great musicians coming up, a lot of people I was really looking up to, Wynton and Branford and Donald Harrison and Terrence Blanchard and all those guys, all these cats coming out of New Orleans, and I couldn't help but think if I had gone to high school there, then maybe I'd be part of that crew too. So I wanted to go. Yeah, so I wanted to go down and see what it was that I missed out on. So I went down there and I found out, and there was so many great musicians down there. Nick Payton was just got out of high school, and Brian Blade and Peter Martin was down there. Well, I guess maybe he's still down there. I'm not sure. And Bryce Winston, who played in Terrence Blanchard's band for a while, was there. And Victor Goins was teaching there. And I could go on, just a whole host of these future prominent players. And so I got quite an education there. Then Nicholas recommended me for the Elvin Jones Jazz Machine, and which is a shocker to me. So that's a whole nother story. But so I got an Elvin's band, and at that point I was finally making enough money that I thought I'd make the transition and went on to New York. So.
Okay. You mentioned the contemporaries of yours from New Orleans, but there were great teachers there too, like Ellis Marsalis and Alvin Batiste. Did you study with any of these people?
Yeah, I studied a little bit with Ellis Marsalis. Unfortunately, I couldn't study with him as much as I wanted to because of financial reasons. But we did get in some, and then I got together with Alvin Batiste once, and we talked about me moving over to Baton Rouge and studying with him, and it was kind of a time where I was really trying to make a decision about what to do, and I wound up moving to New York. Musically, I do regret not taking the time to study with him because I think I could have learned a whole lot from him, but particularly as a clarinetist, not just musically. Yeah.
And he also played classical music. You mentioned Elvin Jones. There are a couple of people you've worked with I wanted to ask you about because I think, unfortunately, you never got a chance to record with Elvin, did you?
Yeah, unfortunately.
But it strikes me that there's certain gigs that just the physical stamina required to play the gig. You know, I think of like if you were in Tony Williams' band, or if you were in
Yeah.
Cecil Taylor's band, or if you were in Elvin Jones' band. That did you have to get in shape to keep that gig?
Yeah. Usually with that band, after the first tune, everybody, including Elvin, were just dripping with sweat. And I always tell people that when I was playing in Elvin's band, I mean, if I'm sure all of y'all have seen the Roadrunner cartoon, and there's one like rule, one I'm sure most of y'all remember, where he's running, Wile E. Coyote's running in front of the steamroller, and if he were to stop for 1 second, he would just get plowed over. That's how it was like playing with Elvin.
Now, did you feel any pressure to sound more like Coltrane than you may have sounded in that situation?
Yeah, definitely. But at the same time, I don't think he was really pushing me that way. I think I was putting it on myself.
Okay.
And I still remember the first time I played with him. It was at the Chicago showcase, and you know, and here, you know, he's playing there, and there was a humongous poster of Train on the wall over here. So I'm looking over at Train, I'm looking at Elvin, and thinking like, you know, I was so scared I could barely move my fingers, and another surreal time was one time when McCoy sat, and that was, you know, looking at McCoy, and I'm trying to make this.
I call those the "I am not worthy" moments. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
But I mean, when I think of you, and I'm sure Coltrane was a large influence, but one thing that strikes me about your music is you don't play a lot of notes that aren't necessary. You have a great sense of shaping melodic lines that really set you apart, I think. And I wonder if that was consciously developed, if it was certain people you were listening to or certain music you were listening to?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I started off with Elvin, and I remember it was Nicholas once again that he used to get on my case about checking out Ben Webster. And so, you know, at first I didn't really want to check him out, but when I finally started listening to him, then I thought, man, this is great. And so then I kind of went straight from Train to working on this Ben thing, and I think that Ben Webster got me thinking more melodically and more thinking more that way.
And now, you played with Betty Carter a bit, right?
Yeah.
Because another thing, and listening to, I think it's your latest CD, you play I See Your Face Before Me. Yeah. And I mean, you play slow tunes and you play them slow. You're not double and triple timing everything. And she played some of the slowest tunes ever. I mean, are there gigs you had that sort of worked into this influence?
Yeah, definitely. I have, I'd say the two most important things that helped me when it came to ballads. I had mentioned my mom was an opera singer, but she eventually switched over to jazz, and so a lot of my first gigs were with her. We'd play around the Milwaukee area, and when I moved to St. Louis, around the St. Louis area, and so then I'd have to really, really think about and actually that kind of answers the other question about
the opera influence.
Yeah, the opera influence and the melodic, you know, choice of notes and stuff like that. I got a lot from just playing with her and trying to play around her melodies. I gained a lot from that. But there's a gentleman that lives in St. Louis. He's a little older now. His name is Richard Henderson, and he's not a musician, but he's one of those guys that just knows a lot of music and would always be at the jazz shows there. And he'd always try to get me to go down to his basement and listen to music. And you know, so I eventually went down, and then he proceeded to take me to school. He started putting on all this Dexter Gordon and all this some Ben Webster and Lester Young and basically and really stressing the whole ballad thing, and you know, it was like hanging with a jazz master, and he would get on my case about all the train I was playing at the time and saying you need to learn to play that. So I learned a lot from him actually, and I think this might be the first time I've actually credited him in an interview, but I actually learned a lot from him. You know.
I think I may have met him once.
Yeah, he always wears
bistro.
He wears
and
a
does
hat.
He take a lot of photographs?
Yeah, that's him.
Okay.
Yeah.
He's dedicated.
Yeah, yeah.
He would fit right in Burlington, I'll tell you. I want to ask you some about your own personal dedication. I remember running into you at an IAJE conference several years ago, and you saying, well, I'm going to direct the music in a church, and I'm going to kind of get off the road and won't be touring as much. Could you, and I know that you have very deep religious feelings, could you talk about that decision and, you know, how you got from there to getting back to playing with your own quartets and things like that?
That's another one that's kind of hard for me to say really quickly, but I'll try. I'd say that I'd say that there was a longing in my heart that I had as a young man, and I was trying to make a long story short. I was on the search for something, and I wasn't sure what it was, and eventually my my heart and my logic kind of gravitated, to make a long story short, towards Jesus. And I'd say in 1996, I gave my life to Jesus Christ, and I've been trying to follow him since then. And I'd say at a certain point, I had a lot of well-meaning people trying to tell me that I really needed to be playing more in church, and that I needed to maybe leave the jazz scene, and well-meaning people that didn't really understand jazz. And so there came a certain point where I finally, a position opened up at a church in New York, and so I stopped playing for a while. I stopped playing on the scene for a while. I left all my gigs, and the thing that at the time I was thinking that it was going to lead me towards, I thought I was going to be a preacher, but then the thing I found is when I was working at the church, it was music. I was actually writing more music when I was at the church than before when I came off the scene, and then eventually I developed an injury. I got carpal tunnel in both of my hands from all the typing I was doing, and it got to the point where it actually got pretty bad for a while, and it was actually Joel Weiskopf, the piano player who's going to be playing on the gig tonight, that actually told me that, you know, maybe God's trying to tell you that you need to stop doing that. and so then I resigned from my position there and started back on the scene, and right at the same time I got offered a teaching position at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, where I've been teaching for the past 3 years, and at the same time I started, as soon as I told people I was back, I started getting gigs. I started doing a lot of stuff with Elio Villafranca and with Omir Abatal, and with a host of other people, and some people I hadn't played with before, and so I'm completely back now, and it's been quite a journey. My faith is just as strong or stronger than it was before, but I think I finally reconciled that thing for me. I think it's a personal choice for everybody, but for me, I know I'm supposed to be playing jazz.
Now, there are a couple of things I want to touch on. I'll get back to, but if we could, stay with your faith for a minute, because you play a lot of sacred music, gospel, spiritual music. Yeah. You title a lot of your compositions with biblical references. Yeah. And I mean, I could imagine you hearing it from all sides, hearing people who are very religious saying, why are you putting jazz into this music? Yeah. And people who aren't particularly religious saying, why are you putting religion into jazz? Yeah. Have you found resistance to any of this, or what has the response been? I found some resistance. I found more of
more just the silent treatment than someone coming up to you and say, you really shouldn't be doing that, blah blah blah. I've had a couple of people saying that to me. I've had a couple of CD reviews where there were some pointed words, but I'd say that I was expecting that when I started doing that, and but it's something that I felt led to do, and I'm sure I'll continue on one level or another.
Okay. Now, some people would say choosing to live in Knoxville, Tennessee, is a more radical removal from jazz than taking a gig with a church in Manhattan. You know, so how has that affected your professional career? That base of operation.
I'd say that obviously it's kind of hurt my my New York presence a little bit. You know, I'd like to be playing in New York a little bit more, but obviously it's but as far as my road thing, it's I still get out quite a bit. I mean, I have since I've been back, I've performed in Russia. I've been to Israel twice. I've been to Italy. I'm supposed to go to Poland later this year. I've been around the country many times, and I've been back to New York many times, and so it's and as a matter of fact, tomorrow I head to Qatar to do 3 weeks there, and so it's one of those things where when you know, I'm actually working pretty good.
Okay.
So it's
and you're also a colleague of one of the great musicians, Donald Brown, and
Yeah.
And that must be a great opportunity. Are people familiar with Donald Brown? I hope. Okay.
Yeah.
Because he's been there for quite a while. Is that his hometown now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, I mean, it's not his hometown. He, like me, he was offered a job at the University of Tennessee, and so he's been there for a while now. I'm not sure how long, maybe 20 years or something like that.
Yeah. Another musician I wanted to ask you about, and I believe you were here with his quartet in my past experience, was Andrew Hill.
Yeah.
And I mean, he created such a unique and personal body of music, and you really got to play with him for 10 years or something like that?
Yeah, for a long time, and that was definitely a blessing, and it really helped shape my musical vision a lot.
How did you meet him, and how did that come about?
Well, it was kind of funny. I was at an IAJE conference one time, and my manager at the time, Gail Boyd, she came up and said, "Hey, Greg, this is Andrew Hill." And I was daydreaming or something, and I didn't really, so I just said, "Oh, hi." And then she just repeated, "Andrew Hill." And I'm like, "Oh, the Andrew Hill." and so it was, and so I felt like a complete idiot. But that was it. I hadn't seen him after that, and I did one time I was playing with my band and played this gig open. It was when I was on Impulse, and I did this thing opening for Brecker at this festival in New York, and Mike Brecker, and I didn't know, but he was in the audience, and about a week or two later, his manager called up and asked me to do some dates with him, and so I was like, "Yeah, of course," and it went from there.
Okay. I'm not a musician, but it strikes me that I can't, people say, well, there's a relationship to Monk, but, as far as the compositional forms and everything, it's at another place entirely. Could you say something about the particular challenges of playing his music and what stood out for you?
Well, for me, at the time, it was the freest situation that I had played in, and I still remember the first rehearsal I had with him, and I was given all this music, and I had practiced it, and I felt like I was ready, and so I went in, and so we proceeded to play through this piece, and at a certain point, I was soloing, I was playing the changes, and then I just kind of stopped everybody and I said, "Hey, Andrew, I think I have like a different set of changes in what you're playing, and could you write down what you're doing? And he said, oh, sure. So he goes and he writes these changes in, and so I said, okay. And he counts it off. I start soloing again, and he starts playing some completely different changes. And so I'm like, oh, okay. And there wasn't any problem from that point on because I got it. I mean, Andrew, he was brilliant, and he used to do things to try to get more out of us as musicians and get us to listen and to really, really try to work more as a group. And that's, yeah.
Okay. Now, when you decided to get more active again,
Yeah.
I noticed on the CDs are people you've been playing with over the years, and I think some are in the band tonight.
Yeah.
So was it just like old friends waiting to hear from you and, oh, yeah, let's play the music again, or did you have to basically form a band anew?
Well, my drummer, Jameo, and my bassist, Sean, we've been playing together. Like me and Sean, we've been playing together since 1998. And Jameo, he's been playing with us since 2000. And so essentially when I first, and I knew Joel from actually more of the church circles than from the jazz scene, because he actually had taken a lengthy sabbatical from the scene himself, for the same reasons that I did. And so essentially when I came back on the scene, the very first thing I did was tell my producer, Niels Winther, for Steeplechase Records, and he immediately got me on got another record date up, and I was a little nervous about, am I really going to be ready for this, because I was really out of shape, so basically, I did a band with Joel and with Jameo and actually another bassist named Chris Haney, and then that was The Strongest Love, and that was kind of like, and then from then I put my old band together from before with basically Jameo and Sean and George Callaghan, and we did like a couple of gigs in New York, and then recorded Monuments, and and then from there on. But the thing that the problem that I've run into for years is that I've done a lot. I do a lot of stuff as a sideman, but I'm usually so busy with other stuff that I don't really get to push myself as a leader as much. And so I'd say that and to this day that's it's a blessing and it's an issue.
But you seem to be writing a lot of music, or is that music that you've written over the years that you're just getting a chance to?
Yeah, a lot of stuff is like stuff that I've written over the years that maybe I've added some more stuff to, okay. but that's been more of my thing. I've been more of a career sideman. So I get to do stuff with my group sometimes, but I think people in general know me more as, play with Bill Frisell or play with Andrew or play with,
Right, yeah. Well, that's why it's an even rarer treat that we're going to get to hear you doing your own stuff tonight. I wanted to see if there were any questions out in the house. I always say the first one's the hardest. No? Yep.
Actually, I was thinking of the fusion between opera and jazz. And I think it was maybe 5 years ago I heard a recording of Louis Armstrong doing Mac the Knife with Lotte Lenya. And it was so funny because Lotte Lenya would keep on going, Mackie's back in town. And Louis would say, no, it's like Mackie's back in town. And so Lotte Lenya would go, Mackie's back. She could never get the syncopation out of playing off the beat.
Yeah, that's about how it was for me when I first started playing jazz.
Were there any particular keys that unlocked the rhythmic door for you in terms of music you heard?
Yeah. When I was in St. Louis, because when I was playing in Milwaukee, I was real square. I mean, I was playing in funk bands and stuff, but I was really square, like super square. And yeah, I'm just being honest. You know? But I when I was living in St. Louis, I had I got asked to join this blues band, and we had 6 nights a week at this club called Hillary's, and that was some really, really greasy blues, like some really, really greasy stuff. And they took me to school, and I'd say after a half year of that, I felt like I knew what to do then.
Okay. All right.
And I felt like I finally was able to make that transition from being a straight classical guy to someone that actually kind of sounded like a jazz guy. You know?
So here's a question that'll interest no one in the room but me. Where is Hillary's in St. Louis, or where was it?
It's in Soulard.
Okay. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
It was I forget Martha Evans, Coalition.
Okay.
You
Yeah.
remember Buzzy Thompson and do you know?
Well, I mean, I've met some of these people, but I'm way before your time, you know.
Okay.
So, I mean, when I was coming up,
Jimmy
Julius
Hines.
Hempel and Oliver Lake were still local. You know,
Yeah.
so that was a long time ago. But no, there's always been a great scene. Plus, when I was coming up, Ike and Tina Turner were a local band in St. Louis. So
Wow. Okay.
yeah, and Oliver Sane and Fontella
Yeah.
Bass and Lester Bowie
Yeah.
and Blewett and, you know,
Yeah.
those folks. Anyway, as I say, I don't want to get off track. Greg and I can talk about this later on or something. Any more questions? Yes?
You mentioned writing a lot of music for the church. Did you write vocals in addition to instrumental?
No, I was more. I was kind of like the church arranger, and so I get a lot of. And some of the stuff was actually quite complicated, because if you hear like some of the contemporary gospel groups like Israel Houghton or Ty Tribbett or man, I'm having a mental blank. There's one in particular that I'm just spacing out. Man, what's her name? It'll come to me, but one of my favorite singers, but I'm kind of having a space. Yeah, some of the stuff can get quite complicated. And so I actually got quite a musical education while I was there. And so.
Did you get to work with younger musicians when you were in the church? Were younger people playing in the church?
Yeah, younger and older, and some of them were really good, particularly some of the pianists and drummers, and there was a phenomenal bassist that played there too. I'd say I'm still trying to remember that name; it's bugging me. I got to work with musicians.
But when you were young, you were not playing in the church, were you?
No, I'm not. No,
Okay.
no.
I mean, some of us, we think of church music, we think, oh, somebody's playing an organ. But they're electric basses and guitars.
Yeah, this was a very lively church.
Okay.
A very, very lively church. A great church. It was a great church. And Times Square Church in Manhattan. It's a great church, and I highly recommend it to anyone.
Anyone else? Any more questions? No. Okay. Well, because Greg is going to start at 6, I didn't want to detain him so he could prepare for the performance. And I'm sure everybody knows it's the last night of the festival. Greg's set begins down here at 6 o'clock, and Pancho Sanchez, his concert upstairs begins at 8 o'clock. So it's a great double bill, if you will, a great way to end the festival. And I want to thank Greg.